Hey, friends, Kenny Ortiz here. I am the Director of Online Education and member of the faculty at Bethany Global University in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Most of you watching this video are students at Bethany Global University, but because it's live on YouTube, I would imagine there are others watching this as well. If you are one of my students, you have a question, feel free to reach out to me by phone, email, text message, whatever is most convenient for you. If you're not one of my students, you're watching this and you want to interact with me, just feel free to leave a comment below, and I hope to be able to engage with you here on YouTube or social media, wherever you're watching this. In this particular video, I'm going to cover a piece of content that I think is extremely important when we're talking about critical thinking, and we're talking about evaluating arguments. A large part of critical thinking is listening to arguments, listening to people make a case, and then evaluating those arguments appropriately. And so that's an essential component to critical thinking. There is a piece of content, a chapter or a section of a chapter from a book called How to Read a Book. That's the title of the book, How to Read a Book. It is by Mortimer Adler. Mortimer Adler, largely considered one of the most influential educators and one of the most influential philosophers in the United States in the 20th century. So in 1940, he wrote this book called How to Read a Book, and it was an instant classic and one of the best-selling books in American history, tremendously influential in a lot of ways. I love his work, and I rely upon it quite a bit in a lot of my teaching. In this particular section, I'm going to talk about, he's talking about the idea of disagreeing with the author. So when you're reading a book, he says, pretend like you're having a conversation with the author. So you're reading, the author is talking, and then you're going to kind of talk back. And Adler says there are certain things that the reader can say, and there are certain things the reader cannot say. Like there are certain things that is absolutely inappropriate for you to, in your talking back to the reader, or excuse me, to the author, without some framework. And so I'll explain that in a second. Adler makes the case that too many people are too quick to disagree. Now, he's writing this in 1940. I think this is even a greater problem today in 2020. Sometimes people will say things and will respond by saying, oh, well, I disagree with that. But the reality is you actually don't have enough information to disagree. You're not entitled to disagree. And this is kind of a problem in modern America. Many Americans believe that they are entitled to disagree. Oh, I'm an American. I have my opinion. Well, if you actually don't know what you're talking about, you're not entitled to an opinion, okay? So let me give you an example. Me, Kenny Ortiz, I'm not a medical doctor. So if you come to me with some weird rash on your arm that I've never seen before, well, I'm not entitled to have an opinion as to what that is. I'm going to go, I don't have enough education to have an opinion on this rash. You need to go see a doctor, because a doctor could actually help you, or maybe a mom, right? Moms seem to know lots about rashes, but I'm not a mom and I'm not a doctor, so I am not capable, I'm not equipped to have an opinion that's worth anything. So it is better for me not to have an opinion rather than for me to have a silly, uninformed, irrational opinion. It is better for me to say, listen, I don't know anything about rashes. I'm not a doctor. I've not been to medical school. I don't have an opinion. And if someone were to say, well, I think this rash is blank, 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 whatever it is, you should not say, well, I disagree. No, you should say, well, I don't know. And so frequently when people say, well, I disagree, what they really mean is, I don't like. Like I say something, they go, well, I don't know that I agree with you. Well, you're actually not educated enough to agree or disagree. What you're really saying is you don't like. And this bothers, maybe you're watching this is bothering you. It's potentially, this bothers a lot of people. A lot of people just feel the need to defend their right. I gotta have my right to have my blah, 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 blah. And just chill. Like, no, you don't have a right to have an opinion. You're not entitled to an opinion. What is wiser and better is for you to go research, read, be objective, and then allow the information to inform. So here's what Adler says you can say, right? So I've basically told you what Adler says you cannot say. But here's what Adler says you can say. I'll put it on the screen there. He says the 4 points can be briefly summarized by conceiving the reader as conversing with the author. That's what I said earlier. Like, pretend you're having a conversation with the author. After he has said, I understand, but I disagree, he can make the following remarks to the author, right? So if you understand the person, if you understand what they've said, you should say one of four things. You can say, listen, I disagree with you, and here are the reasons why I disagree. You are either uninformed, misinformed, illogical, or your analysis is incomplete, or sometimes we would say your analysis is inadequate. Okay. So if you're listening to someone talk and you disagree with them, you are obligated to be able to explain why from one of these four things, right? So if I say to you, gravity is the speed of gravity, or the force of gravity is 10 meters per second. You could say to me, Kenny, I disagree with you. The reason why I disagree with you is because you are actually misinformed. You have been given bad information. It's not 10 meters per second. It's actually 9.83 meters per second. Okay, that you are actually misinformed. You have wrong information. Now, someone may also be uninformed, right? They means they're missing information. Uninformed means something you don't know. Misinformed means you know it, but it's actually inaccurate. So what if I said to you, actually, no one in the universe knows the force or speed of gravity. You could say, well, Kenny, I disagree with you. You're actually uninformed. But the fact that gravity has been measured with absolute perfect specificity, and it's 9.83 meters per second, right? So that's the idea. You're allowed to disagree. You are absolutely allowed to disagree if you can point out how I am uninformed, misinformed. If you can't point out how I am uninformed and misinformed, then you really probably don't have a good basis to disagree, is what Mortimer Adler says in his book. The third reason is if someone is being illogical, you can say to someone, listen, I disagree because I think your reasoning is not coherent, or I think you've committed a logical fallacy. And for those of you who are my students at BGU, we're going to talk a lot about logical fallacies. Those of you who are in my critical thinking course, I talk a lot about logical fallacies. I drive it home. Logical fallacies are a huge, huge, huge component as to why people grossly misunderstand things on a regular basis. So it's really important. If you are doing something that's illogical, or your analysis may be incomplete. You may have an incomplete analysis. And I think it's important to consider. You can disagree with someone. If I come to you and I say, hey, I did a survey. I surveyed 10 women, and I asked them their favorite ice cream, and all 10 of them said their favorite ice cream is vanilla. Well, now my assumption is, or my conclusion is, all women say vanilla ice cream is their favorite ice cream. You would say to me, well, Kenny, I disagree with you because I think your analysis is incomplete. You have not surveyed enough women to be able to actually make that sort of conclusion. You don't have enough data. So you might be right. You might be wrong. You might be misinformed. You might be uninformed. But the real issue with your conclusion is not that you're right or wrong, you're missing information, is that you actually haven't done enough study yet to actually come to the conclusion. And so what you really need to do is you need to survey 1,000 women or 2,000 women. And you need to make sure you get different women from all different walks of life and all different socioeconomic backgrounds and all different parts of the country and different, and all different preferences. Like, you need to get a wide diversity of women, and you need to get, into the thousands. Then you can come to conclusions about what is the best type of ice cream. If you've only polled 10, it's probably not enough. And so so if you disagree with someone, it is perfectly appropriate. It is okay to have an opinion. Let me say that. It is okay. It's a big if you can point out in which way someone is flawed, right? You can say, I think you are uninformed or misinformed, illogical, or incomplete. If you are not capable of clearly explaining one of these four, or why someone is falling short in one of these four areas, then quite frankly, you probably don't have the basis for an actual disagreement, right? I think this is extremely important in a lot of ways. So Mortimer Adler's work is really good. For those of you who are my students in the critical thinking class, you will be required to read from Mortimer Adler this week. as a companion to this video, you will be required to read the chapter from the textbook, How to Read a Book. And so make sure you read that chapter, read it thoroughly, read it slowly, read it with an open mind, read it objectively, read it prayerfully, and again, read it slowly and carefully, and really consider some of the concepts that Mortimer Adler is putting forth in that section. I believe it will be extremely helpful to you as you endeavor to be a good critical thinker.